In just 29 seconds, one of British television's most beloved actors would find himself locked in a vicious verbal battle that would expose the true nature of daytime TV's so-called sweetheart. What started as a simple discussion about Stephen Graham's latest project quickly descended into a character assassination that left viewers stunned and the seasoned actor questioning everything he thought he knew about industry. The atmosphere in the Lorraine studio felt different from the moment Stephen Graham walked through those familiar doors. The usual warmth that guests expect was replaced by something colder, more calculated. Lorraine Kelly sat behind her desk, her signature smile plastered across her face. But there was something predatory lurking behind those eyes that Graham couldn't quite place. "Stephen, lovely to have you back," Lorraine began, her voice dripping with false sweetness as the cameras rolled. "Now, I have to ask about your recent comments regarding the state of British cinema. Some might say you've been rather critical of your own industry." Graham shifted in his chair, immediately sensing the trap being laid. "I wouldn't say critical, Lorraine. I'd say honest. There are issues we need to address if we want British film to compete globally." "But don't you think," Lorraine interrupted, leaning forward with that predatory gleam growing brighter, "that someone in your position should be more supportive? More grateful, perhaps?" The word grateful hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Graham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Grateful? For what exactly?" "Well, for the opportunities you've been given. Not everyone gets the chances you've had, do they?" Lorraine's tone was becoming sharper, the mask beginning to slip. "Some might say you've been quite fortunate to work with the directors you have, considering." "Considering what?" Graham's voice had dropped to a dangerous quiet. Lorraine's smile widened, but it never reached her eyes. "Oh, come now, Stephen. We both know there are actors with more traditional leading man looks who might have been overlooked for some of those roles. You've done well for yourself, haven't you?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Even the production crew behind the cameras exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the usual softball interview they were accustomed to seeing on the morning show. Graham sat back in his chair, processing what had just been said. The implication was clear, and it was ugly. "Are you suggesting that my success is somehow undeserved? That I've been given roles out of pity?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Lorraine replied with mock innocence. "I'm simply pointing out that in today's climate, there are many factors that go into casting decisions. Representation, diversity. You know how it is." The actor's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "Right. So my 25 years in this industry, my training, my dedication to my craft, none of that matters? It's just about how I look?" Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be so sensitive, Stephen. I'm just saying that perhaps a little more appreciation for the system that supported you might be in order, rather than constantly criticizing it." "The system?" Graham's voice was rising now, his famous composure beginning to crack. "You mean the system that typecasts working-class actors? The system that assumes we should be grateful for scraps? That system?" "Oh, here we go," Lorraine sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes for the cameras. "The working-class hero routine. How very predictable." Something shifted in the studio atmosphere. The crew behind the cameras looked increasingly uncomfortable, and even Lorraine's production team seemed to be questioning where this was heading. But Lorraine Kelly was just getting started. "You know what I find interesting, Stephen?" she continued, her voice taking on an even more condescending tone. "You come from Liverpool, don't you? And yet, you've managed to work your way into some very prestigious productions. Some might wonder if there's been a bit of, shall we say, creative embellishment about your background." Graham stared at her in disbelief. "Creative embellishment? What the hell are you talking about?" "Language, Stephen," Lorraine tutted, but her eyes were gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "We are on morning television, after all. Though, I suppose that's another example of the rough edges you've managed to smooth over for Hollywood, isn't it?" The actor was on the edge of his seat now, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. "You're sitting there questioning my authenticity? My background? My right to have the career I've built?" "I'm not questioning anything," Lorraine replied smoothly. "I'm simply observing. It's fascinating how some people manage to reinvent themselves, don't you think? Transform from one thing into something else entirely. And what exactly do you think I've transformed from?" Graham's voice was dangerous now, barely controlled fury simmering beneath the surface. Lorraine's smile became even more poisonous. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean. We've all heard the stories about your early days, the struggles, the questionable choices, the people you had to impress to get where you are. The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. Graham's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. The implication in Lorraine's words was unmistakable, and it was crossing every line of professional decency. You're suggesting that I've slept my way to success? Graham's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute fury. I'm not suggesting anything, Lorraine repeated with fake sweetness. I'm simply wondering how a lad from Kirkby managed to catch the attention of Shane Meadows, Martin Scorsese, and others. It's quite remarkable, really. But as the tension reached a breaking point, something in Lorraine's expression suggested she was just warming up, and the worst was yet to come. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Lorraine leaned back in her chair, that predatory smile spreading wider across her face. She had drawn blood, and now she was ready to go in for the kill. You know, Stephen, she began, her voice taking on an almost whisper-like quality that somehow made it even more menacing. Since we're being so honest today, perhaps we should talk about your recent project choices. Some rather interesting decisions you've made lately. Graham's knuckles were white as he gripped the chair arms. What are you getting at now? Well, there's been quite a bit of chatter in certain circles about your methods, your preparation techniques. Lorraine's pause was deliberate, calculated for maximum impact, particularly for your more intense roles. The actor's eyes narrowed. My preparation is professional and thorough. I take my craft seriously. Oh, I'm sure you do, Lorraine replied, her tone dripping with false understanding. But there are whispers, aren't there, about how far you're willing to go, how immersive your research becomes. If you have something to say, just fucking say it. Graham snapped, his composure finally cracking completely. Lorraine's eyes lit up with satisfaction. She had him exactly where she wanted him. There's that temper we've heard so much about. Tell me, Stephen, is it true what they say about what happened on the set of your last film, the incident with the director? Graham stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. What incident? What the hell are you talking about? Sit down, Stephen, Lorraine commanded, her voice suddenly cold and authoritative. We're not finished here. Like hell we're not, Graham shot back, but something in her tone made him hesitate. Lorraine's smile turned absolutely vicious. Oh, but we are just getting to the good part. You see, I've been doing some digging, and I've spoken to some very interesting people. People who were there. People who saw what really happened when you thought the cameras weren't rolling. The blood drained from Graham's face. You're lying. Am I? Lorraine tilted her head, studying his reaction like a scientist observing a specimen. Tell me, how does it feel to know that your little secret isn't so secret anymore? That people are finally starting to talk about the real Stephen Graham? There is no secret, Graham said through gritted teeth, but his voice lacked conviction. Oh, but there is, Lorraine purred. And it's quite the story, isn't it? The beloved actor, the working-class hero, the man who supposedly represents authentic British talent. What would your fans think if they knew the truth about what you're really like when you think nobody's watching? Graham's breathing had become labored. The studio lights felt impossibly hot, and sweat was beginning to form on his forehead. You're fishing. You've got nothing. Nothing? Lorraine laughed, and it was the most chilling sound anyone in that studio had ever heard. I have phone calls, Stephen. Recordings. I have witnesses who are finally ready to speak. I have documentation of behavior that would make your most devoted fans sick to their stomachs. You're bluffing, Graham said, but his voice was barely a whisper now. Lorraine reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, placing it deliberately on the desk between them. Am I? The sight of the folder seemed to hit Graham like a physical blow. His face went ashen, and for a moment, it looked like he might collapse back into his chair. You see, Lorraine continued, savoring every moment of his distress, the thing about secrets is that they have a way of coming out eventually, especially when someone has been as careless as you have. Whatever you think you know, Graham began, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and something that looked disturbingly like fear. Whatever lies someone has told you. Lies? Lorraine's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. Oh, Stephen, These aren't lies. These are facts. Documented, verified, witnessed facts about the real man behind the carefully crafted public image. Graham lunged forward, his hand slamming down on Lorraine's desk with such force that her coffee mug jumped. "You listen to me, you manipulative bitch. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it ends now." The studio erupted in chaos. Security guards stepped forward, unsure whether to intervene. Camera operators continued filming, knowing they were capturing television gold. Production assistants whispered frantically into their headsets. But Lorraine Kelly remained perfectly calm, that terrifying smile never wavering. "Game? Oh, Stephen, this isn't a game. This is justice. This is accountability. This is what happens when people like you think they can get away with anything just because they're famous." "Get away with what?" Graham screamed, his voice cracking with desperation and fury. "What exactly do you think I've done?" Lorraine opened the folder slowly, deliberately, her fingers dancing over the contents like a pianist preparing for a performance. "Shall we start with the incident in Manchester? Or perhaps we should begin with what happened in that hotel room in Prague?" Graham's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, terror, and finally, pure rage. "You have no right." "I have every right," Lorraine cut him off, her voice rising for the first time. "I have the right to expose hypocrites. I have the right to show people who their heroes really are. And you, Stephen Graham, are about to learn what it feels like when someone finally stands up to you." The folder remained unopened, but its presence on the desk seemed to radiate menace. Graham stared at it like it was a loaded gun pointed at his heart. "You want to destroy me," he said. And for the first time, his voice carried a note of genuine vulnerability. "Destroy you?" Lorraine shook her head, that awful smile still plastered across her face. "Oh no, Stephen, I want to reveal you. I want to show everyone exactly what kind of man you really are." The tension in the studio had reached a fever pitch, and it was clear that whatever came next would change everything forever. Graham's chest was heaving as he stared at the unopened folder, every instinct screaming at him to grab it, to tear it apart, to destroy whatever lies Lorraine thought she had assembled. But before he could move, she began to speak again, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "The thing is, Stephen," she said, slowly opening the folder, "I know exactly what kind of man you are. I know about the tantrums, the threats, the way you treat people when you think nobody important is watching." "You know nothing," Graham spat, but his voice was hollow now, defeated. "I know that you screamed at a 17-year-old runner until she cried because she brought you the wrong coffee," Lorraine continued, pulling out what appeared to be a typed statement. "I know that you threatened to have a grip fired because he accidentally bumped into you. I know that you've spent years building this image of being this salt of the earth, working-class hero while treating the actual working-class people around you like dirt." Graham's face went through a series of expressions, but the fight seemed to be draining out of him. Those are isolated incidents. Everyone has bad days." "Bad days?" Lorraine's voice rose to a near shriek. 23 documented incidents over 5 years, Stephen. 23 times that people have come forward to describe your abusive behavior. And that's just what I could verify. She pulled out photograph after photograph, spreading them across the desk like playing cards. "Here's security footage from the Manchester set. Here's you throwing a chair at a wall, because the catering wasn't to your liking. Here's you grabbing a costume designer by the arm hard enough to leave bruises because you didn't like the color of a shirt." Graham stared at the images, his face pale and drawn. "You don't understand the pressure." "The pressure?" Lorraine stood up now, her voice filling the studio with righteous fury. "The pressure of what, Stephen? Being successful? Being well paid? Being admired? How dare you use pressure as an excuse for terrorizing people who can't fight back?" "That's not, I never." Graham's words were failing him, the weight of the evidence crushing his ability to form coherent defenses. "And the Prague incident," Lorraine continued relentlessly, "where you cornered a young journalist in her hotel room because you didn't like the questions she'd asked earlier, where you stood in her doorway, blocking her exit, while you screamed at her about respect and knowing her place." "She was twisting my words," Graham whispered, but even he seemed to know how pathetic it sounded. "She was doing her job," Lorraine shot back. "A job that apparently terrified her so much after meeting you that she considered leaving journalism altogether." The studio had gone completely silent, except for the sound of Graham's labored breathing and the rustle of papers as Lorraine continued to lay out her evidence. Camera operators zoomed in on Graham's face, capturing every moment of his psychological destruction. "You know what the real tragedy is, Stephen?" Lorraine's voice had taken on an almost conversational tone now, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "You had everything. Talent, success, respect, admiration, and you threw it all away because you couldn't handle the basic human decency of treating people with kindness." Graham looked up at her, and for a moment, there was something almost childlike in his expression. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to own it," Lorraine said simply. "I want you to admit what you are. I want you to stop hiding behind this facade of being some working-class champion and acknowledge that you've become everything you once claimed to hate." Graham started, then stopped. He looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the crew members who were staring at him with a mixture of fascination and disgust. "I can't do this." "Can't do what, Stephen?" Lorraine pressed. "Can't face the truth about yourself?" "I won't sit here and let you destroy me," Graham said, his voice gaining strength for the first time in minutes. "I won't let you turn me into your victim for ratings." "Victim?" Lorraine laughed, and it was a sound devoid of any humor. "You're not the victim here, Stephen. You never were. The victims are all the people you've hurt, intimidated, and traumatized over the years." Graham stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward with a crash that echoed through the studio. "I'm done. I'm fucking done with this." "Running away, Stephen?" Lorraine called after him as he started toward the studio exit. "That's very brave of you. Very heroic." Graham stopped dead in his tracks, his shoulders rigid with tension. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around, might come back for one final confrontation. But instead, he just shook his head. "You're a monster," he said without turning around. "You're a fucking monster. And everyone who works with you knows it. At least I'm an honest monster," Lorraine replied coldly. "I don't pretend to be something I'm not." Graham reached the studio door, his hand on the handle. "This isn't over." "Oh, but it is," Lorraine said, settling back into her chair with the satisfied air of someone who had just completed a masterpiece. "It's very much over." The studio door slammed shut behind Stephen Graham with such force that it seemed to shake the entire building. The sound reverberated through the space, leaving behind an almost deafening silence. Lorraine Kelly sat behind her desk, surrounded by the scattered evidence of her victory, that terrible smile still playing across her lips. She looked directly into the main camera, her expression shifting back to the practiced warmth that had made her famous. "Well," she said, her voice returning to its usual cheerful tone as if nothing had happened, "that's all we have time for today. We'll be right back after this break with a lovely feature on spring gardening." As the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, the crew stood frozen in shock, trying to process what they had just witnessed. But Lorraine Kelly simply gathered up her papers, placed them neatly back in the folder, and walked off the set as if she had just conducted the most ordinary interview in the world. The confrontation was over, but its implications would echo through the industry for months to come.